What's on, minifans? In this video, we are making a toxic dump. So I do some similar tiles to my Zone Mortalis ones around the edge of a 30 by 30 tile, and then I fill the rest with toxic resin. Anyway, if you like anything in this video, feel free to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell to stay up to date with my content. I have some Amazon affiliate links in the description below for my most used items, and any templates I use are on my Patreon, and they're free of charge. Anyway, enough of this, let's get on to crafting. Okie dokie. So I'm using 3mm chipboard this time, rather than my standard 2mm, because when I first started making the Zone Mortalis tiles, this is what I used, and I need this to match up. So I do 4 25cm by 5cm strips. So these will get fitted into a square, which will be 30cm wide. And then I cut out some sections, and you can just see in the video what I do here, because those the cutouts will have granny grating put in, but I want it to be on chipboard, so that's going to be on 2mm bits of chipboard, yeah, with the granny grating stuck on top. So I've made those cutouts on 2mm chipboard, and then I just cover this in PVA, line it up, and glue on the granny grating, and then I just trim off the edges afterwards. I then glue those into the 3mm chipboard bits we've done already. And then what I've done is a load of 5mm trim to go around this. And I'm doing it like corner pieces, and then a strip in the center like 10cm, and then I have little dividers. You can see the card I've cut out, and we'll glue this on later. Off camera, I've made the box that this is all going to sit on. So I started off with a base, which is 30 by 30cm of like MDF or plywood, I guess. And then I've cut 5cm wide sections of XPS foam, and this XPS foam is 4.5cm tall. So I've glued all that on, and then I've put some filler around the edges because I am putting resin in here, and I was trying to kind of waterproof it, I guess, or resin proof it. So anyway, that's all done off camera. So what I do now is glue those chipboard bits we've just made onto the XPS foam, and I just use PVA throughout here. and then I glue that trim on so you can see where it all goes. And I've actually marked, so they're kind of 10 centimeter sections, so 3 sections per side, including the corner pieces. I've marked in 2.5 centimeters from each side and done a dot on the trim, and then the little dividing pieces I've done a dot in the middle, and those are going to be for rivets later. I just use a little bit of filler here and try and fill in the gaps between the chipboard pieces, because there's a few prominent ones. So yeah, I just use a bit of filler and then sand it later. So I did that other little cutout in the chipboard, and this is for some like cables or pipes. So I've got some old cable from an adapter, and I've got some straw which I've cut into centimeter sections, which fits perfectly on that bit of cable. So that gets glued in, and then I have, it's like a coffee straw, but it's like 3 tubes. It looks very cool. So I cut a section of that, and that gets glued in as well. And I just use super glue here, but I'm very careful not to get it on the XPS phone. I decided now that the trim wasn't quite enough. I wanted a bit more detail. So I've cut 2 centimeter long sections of 5mm card, and then at a 45-degree angle snipped off the sides. So I do a load of these, and these get glued to the kind of sides of each section. Then I've cut some more card, and these are just like little rectangles, and they get glued in various places just for a bit more detail. And on to riveting. Here we go. So again, I'm using my fingernail beads, and I've just got cocktail stick, bit of blue tack on the end, whack some super glue on something it's not going to soak into, pick up a rivet on the blue tack, dip it into the super glue, boom, into place, job's done. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Moving on, I'm doing a couple of pipes to feed into this pit, and I've just got some of those kids pipes which I've sawed them down so they're a bit shorter. I've given them a good sand because that plastic is really smooth, and I don't think paint will stick. And then I've got like the inside of some hair curlers, but they've got these little spiky bits on, so I trim those off using wire cutters and then just sanding it down, and then I cut those pieces down and glue them onto the end of a kid's pipe for a bit more detail. On the inside walls of the pit, I'm putting those archways which I was casting in the last video. Now, the first 2 I did with normal resin, 2-part resin. But I realised I had to make loads of these. So I figured I'll use UV resin. And I got my wife to buy me some. And it was just labelled as thick, hard. So I thought this would be, perfect. But my goodness, it's so thick. It was unusable for this. So I had to buy some more. And that stuff is just awesome. Just sets so quickly. Because the 2-part resin I've got is 24-hour cure time. This stuff, like a minute or two under a UV light, boom, hard as rock, is absolutely brilliant. So anyway, those arches are going around these inside walls, and they're 5 mil wide, but I want a kind of topper to this, so that's what I do here. So I've got some of the 2 mil chipboard, and I've cut out a square, which is it's just under 20 centimeters long and wide, and then I cut out so it's 5 mils wide, and I leave these kind of corner pieces like triangles with a notch cut out just for a bit more detail, and then the straight bits I glue on cable tie. Before painting everything, I sealed it all with Mod Podge, and I was quite deliberate to get some all around the edges of like the pit, so I desperately don't want any leaks. Off camera, I've made a mold of one of those barrels I made ages ago, so I've cast a few of these in resin, and then I've primed everything black, base coated in burnt umber, and I go ahead and give everything a dry brush in dark silver, and then a light dry brush in bright silver. You'll notice I haven't actually assembled everything yet. I haven't glued on those archways. I figured it would be a lot easier painting everything first and then, assembling afterwards. So I've mixed up some grey, and I paint like the platform, like the tiles, and the inside walls of the pit. But I leave one of the tiles, one of the centre sections, just as is, and we paint that black later for hazard stripes. And then I go ahead and dry brush some white on the center of those grey sections, just to, make it look a bit cooler. And I do some spots roughly where, or like the center of where the archways will be on the inside walls. I've now masked with masking tape on the black tile where the hazard stripes will go. And I sponge on flesh colour and then yellow on over the top after it's dried. One of the most satisfying bits, honestly, peeling off that masking tape, and it's pretty good. It bled the yellow bled a little bit underneath, so I just touched this up with black off camera. I wanted a bit more variation with the grey tiles, so I've just masked off. It's about 1 centimetre wide, kind of stripe going around one of the corners on the edge. And then I just sponge on white. And then peeling off that masking tape, boom, this one is bang on. And then I just paint those pipes we put in earlier in that recess section just red. Very simple. I wasn't sure how much you'd be able to see through the resin, so I paint the base a darkish green, but I actually off camera go ahead and go over it again with an even darker green. Okie dokie, we're on to assembly now. So I just glue in the archways, and I just use super glue for this. And I don't really measure as such, I just use the rivets as markers, because I'm only doing 3 per side. After all those arches are glued in, I glue that sort of trim bit we made earlier on top of those, and I just use super glue again. Then I glue in those 2 pipes we've done, and just to try and keep them at the same height and level, I've just whacked in some chipboard underneath, a couple of pieces of chipboard underneath, and then I just glue those in with super glue. Onto the barrels, I just sponge on a light blue all over all 3 of them. On to washes, so I just do my homemade black wash all over and then just dab some off the centre of the grey bits. Onto weathering and rust, so I'm just sponging on burnt umber in various places on the metal and then some on the grey bits for a bit of dirt. I did get a little heavy-handed with this on the wall sections, but it's all going to be covered with resin, so I think it's fine. After that burnt umber's dried, where it's going to be rust, I sponge on orange. And then to add a bit more staining and whatnot, I use some homemade brown wash and just chuck this in on various places. And then some of it I dab off with a bit of kitchen towel. Now initially I was just going to chuck those barrels in after I poured the resin in, hoping they'd stay in place, but I thought better of this, so I just glue them in with super glue now. Excuse the camera here, I should have moved it, but hey ho. It's onto the resin pour. So I've mixed up a load of resin. I use about 700 mils, because I actually do 2 pours, but I don't record the second one. But I've mixed the resin, and then I've just whacked in some green paint. Really mixed it up, and I go ahead and pour that in from quite a height. And yeah, it's looking good. Not many bubbles, but I do slam down the whole thing a few times to get rid of any bubbles. I then use like a blowtorch lighter to get rid of the bubbles on the surface, which is kind of awesome. They just go ahead and disappear. But then what I do now is just drip in quite a bit. I didn't mean to do this much, but hey, it turns out okay, I think. So I just pour in some quite light green and then just mix it around with a stirring stick, just trying to get it all swirly. It's kind of hard to see on the video because obviously the resin is pretty shiny, but yeah, it's looking quite cool. So that's the project complete. Here's some photos of the finished piece, and I do a few photos with some of my other tiles just to show how they all fit together. Dead pleased with this. It's the deepest or biggest resin pour I've done yet, and I was pretty paranoid about it, leaking out. I was pretty careful with sealing, all around the edges of the pit, but yeah, still paranoid. So I just had it on baking paper while it was curing, kind of making a bit of a wall around it, so if it did leak, it wasn't going to go anywhere. But it didn't leak anyway, so all good. Yeah, definitely pleased with this. Alrighty, so that's the end of this video. Thanks for tuning in again, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers for now.